All right, today we are on page 43, and our title is Solving Inequalities Using Multiplication or Division. I just abbreviated multiplication to mult. If you have room, feel free to write the whole word. So the biggest thing to remember here, and hopefully you saw this on the investigation, this is the only new rule that you have to remember, only when you're using multiplication or division to solve these. So you're still going to use the same rules for solving equations like you did with solving inequalities using adding and subtracting. But the difference here is that if you multiply or divide, by a negative number, you flip the sign. What I mean by sign is flip the inequality sign. So that's something to keep in mind as we're going through this, and we'll see some examples of that. So let's do some examples solving inequalities using multiplication or division. Here's our first example. Let's say we have the inequality 6x is greater than negative 18. All right, well, I look at this and I think to myself, okay, what operation is this? It's multiplication, so the opposite of that is division. So I need to divide both sides by 6. 6 divided by 6 is 1. So I have x. Negative 18 divided by 6 is negative 3. And then I think to myself, okay, did I multiply or divide by a negative number? Well, it's referring to the actual number that we divided by, right? I don't care that that's negative. I don't care that the answer is negative. I look at what I divided by. In this case, it's a positive 6, so my sign stays the same. So I just bring it down, and I have the inequality x is greater than negative 3. So if I graph that solution, just plot negative 3 and then a couple numbers around it. X is greater than negative 3. This is not including the point negative 3. It does not have the line underneath, so I draw an open circle at negative 3. And then I think, okay, what direction do I need to go? Well, all the solutions, x, is greater than, is bigger than negative 3. So which direction is bigger than negative 3? Well, that's this way. So I shade that way, draw your arrow, and those are my solutions for that problem. Okay, let's do another example. Let's say I have the problem x divided by negative 5 is less than or equal to negative 3. All right, so first I look, okay, what operation is this? It's division, so the opposite of that is multiplication. So I need to multiply it by the number that's down here, right? We're trying to get rid of that. So I'm going to multiply it by negative 5, and that becomes negative 5 over 1 on this side, times negative 5 on both sides. All right, this side is nice because negative 5 over 1 times 1 over negative 5, that's 1. I'm left with x. And then negative 3 times negative 5 is positive 15, so negative times negative is a positive. And then I look at my sign, okay? Here's where our rule comes into play. Because look at the number that I multiplied by. It's a negative. If you multiply or divide by a negative number, flip the sign. So what I need to do is I need to take this and I need to flip it since I multiplied by a negative. So all I do is flip the direction that's facing. If it's the or equal to, you keep the or equal to, it just changes directions. So my final answer here is x is greater than or equal to 15. All right, there's the final answer for that one. Let's graph our solution. Draw 15 and then a couple numbers around it. Now I look at this and I say, okay, that's an or equal to problem. It has a line underneath, so I draw a closed dot at 15. All the solutions are greater than, bigger than, so I draw my arrow on bigger numbers. It goes to the right. All right, let's do a couple more examples. Say I have negative 15 is less than 2.5q. All right, so I look at this and I say, okay, well, what operation is this? It's multiplication, the opposite is division. So I'm going to divide by 2.5 on both sides. 2.5 divided by 2.5 is 1. I'm left with just a q. Let's grab our calculator. Negative 15 divided by 2.5 is equal to negative 6. Great. So I have negative 6, and then I need to figure out where my sign, which way my sign is going to go. Well, I divided by 2.5, which is positive, so my sign stays the same. So I just bring it down, stays exactly the same. Your final answer is negative 6 is less than q. Now, if it freaks you out that the q is on this side, you can switch it, but you have to keep in mind that the sign needs to go with whatever you're switching. So for example, if I switch this to put the q on this side, well, q is greater, right? The alligator is eating the q. So I need to keep the inequality sign eating the q if I switch the order. So that's another way to write the solution, but you have to switch the sign with it because you're switching the order of the q and the negative 6. You can't just switch these around since it's not equal anymore like we did with equations. So let's graph it. I'm going to draw negative 6 and then a couple numbers around it. All right, there's no line underneath. It is not including the point, so I draw an open circle at negative 6. And then I look and say, okay, my solutions, my answers are going to be bigger. So I need everything bigger, which is to the right. All right, let's do one more example. Let's say I have negative 3/2 n is less than or equal to 6. All right, I look at this problem and I say, okay, this is multiplication, the opposite is division. So I'm going to divide both sides by negative 3/2. Divide by negative 3/2. I know on this side, negative 3/2 divided by negative 3/2 is 1, because anything divided by itself is just 1. So I'm left with 1n, so I'm going to bring down the n. Now on this side, I need to figure out what this is. So remember how you divide fractions. Let's change this to positive, sorry. Let's change that to 6/1, divided by negative 3/2. Okay, keep the first, change the sign to multiplication, and switch the order of my numbers. It becomes negative 2/3. Then I just multiply across. 6 times negative 2 is negative 12, and then 3 times 1 is 3. Negative 12/3, you can simplify that. You can think of it like a fraction and simplify. You could also just know that that's a division problem. Negative 12 divided by 3 is negative 4. So that means this is negative 4. And then I need to talk about what happens to my sign. So I divided both sides by negative 3/2. That is a negative number. So because I'm dividing by a negative number, I need to flip the sign. So I'm going to flip it, so it just switches directions. And that's my final answer. N is greater than or equal to negative 4. Let's graph it. Draw a number line with negative 4 and then a couple numbers around it. All right, it is a closed dot because there's a line there. It includes negative 4, closed dot at negative 4, and then my solutions are bigger than negative 4, which means I'm going to the right.